Wallets. There's nothing more popular, it seems, than wallets this year. Everybody's talking about wallets. Everybody's using wallets. Well, there's one particular wallet, which is a pretty good one, which I can pay with, I can transport myself with it, I can open hotel doors with my wallet. The press is full of wallets, and predictably, and I'm not making light of this, there are serious issues about vendor lock-in perhaps, there's serious issues about interoperability, but certainly the analysts are framing the forthcoming wallet wars as being the inevitable kind of battleground for standards and supremacy in this area. This idea that the wallet might even be the new browser. It's certainly going to be an important UX as we exercise information about ourselves online. So it is incredibly important, but I think that they're misframing where the action is, that the interoperability is not necessarily going to be in the wallet. Spoiler alert, the wallet wars are going to play out somewhere else. So, indeed, worried about the prospect of vendor domination, the Open Wallet Foundation was, I was going to say recently formed. It was officially formed probably 9 months ago, but it had its genesis at this very event in Denver exactly 12 months ago. So that was an exciting thing to see. Now, Linux Foundation has subsequently become the home for the Open Wallet Foundation. You'll hear more about Open Wallet, I think, on Thursday. And I don't know if Daniel's here, but he is stewarding this excellent effort. The paradigm that those guys are working within is open standards and interoperability through open standards, which is great, but I don't think it's enough. I think that open standards and good wallet APIs are going to be necessary, but they're not sufficient for the contents of those wallets to make sense, at least at scale. There will be plenty of closed loop and small, maybe three-party wallet accepting regimes, and we've got them already. I can open my hotel room again with my wallet. So clearly there's a level of interoperability, but it doesn't necessarily scale as far as we want it to go. So I'm going to talk about the missing piece of wallet acceptance, and I want to start by talking about the technical quality of wallets and the capability and maturity of these things as data carrying technologies. Because the wallet is many things, and it could be the UX of our digital experience. Cryptographer, PKI kind of security nerd that I am, the thing that turns me on about wallets is very much about the protection that they offer to data and to metadata. And I want to build up that story over the next few minutes about the importance of data and metadata and what that wallet technology does and what that wallet technology does not do. So the way to get there is to talk about the early wallets. Now this metaphor, this is revisionist, if you like. The wallet metaphor, as far as I remember, was not around in 2003 when a superb multifunction smart card was put out by HSBC, Hong Kong Shanghai Bank in Hong Kong, with cooperation of the Hong Kong government. This thing had Hong Kong Post digital certificates for voting and for citizen and immigration. It had a MasterCard issued by HSBC. It had a stored value in there as well, a stored value wallet from Mondex. And I'm missing something, but it had 4 or 5 branded functions in that wallet, and it died after 2 or 3 years. We think that the uptake was confused because it was over-branded, if you like. At about the same time, the MyCard, which is still a successful national ID card in Malaysia, but the original MyCard looked something like that. And again, it was a wallet, PKI-based, multiple digital certificates, multiple functionality, multiple stakeholders. There was no mention of credentials as such back then. It's another metaphor, I think, that really became important a few years later when the late, great Kim Cameron launched the InfoCard effort at IIW. Thank you to Ian Brown for the photo from IIW. I wasn't there that year. The vision of InfoCard was really the first time that the wallet metaphor became really strong and potent, and it was indeed a literal digital InfoCard selector, a literal manifestation of that idea that we would be digitising the things that we've already got, driver's licenses and bank cards and tickets and student cards and what have you. Huge amount of activity at the time. A lot of us in the room were there. Project Higgins, the open source version, Microsoft's work on InfoCard, the InfoCard selector, there were a bunch of options coming out. A real concerted campaign. This was almost a manifestation of the laws of identity, so there was a very strong leadership being shown by Microsoft and Kim, and we started to see the wallet metaphor coming in. Mike's here, at least at Identiverse this week, Mike Jones, and all of Mike's blogs and articles about InfoCard are still at his website, and I would really commend them to you. But that is the InfoCard selector. Card Space was the product name, in action. Such a good idea. And I spoke last year at Identiverse about the market failure of the standard model of identity. As good as this thing was, it was a market failure. Microsoft withdrew it in 2011, I think it was. That was a bad year for identity. Dick Hart's fabulous Skipper startup folded at about the same time. And OpenID servers started to go down, and support for some of those protocols was being withdrawn. Support for the big federation protocols were being withdrawn because that idea of being able to reuse a complex, a semantically rich credential across different silos, that reuse idea, as nice as it is, proves to be easier said than done. And so we saw this market failure. Along comes, the smartest move of all was the smartphone. I was involved internationally with the smart card, smartphone argument. I was probably the last one to admit that the smart card was going to give way to the smartphone. I guess I stopped arguing for about 2019, I guess. But over 2011, 2012, very, very interesting times. Proof again that Apple is a fantastic follower, because the first smart wallet came from Google. Apple not only followed, but they were underperforming against Google as well. The first Apple iPhone wallet did not have NFC for payments. It didn't have any payments at all. And there was some, I've got the quote here somewhere, but somebody around about 2012, 2013 said the only thing that this thing is missing is payments. And once Apple can do that, then maybe they'll start to catch up. So those were sort of prescient words indeed. What are we going to learn from this evolution of smart cards and smartphones and data carriers? I'm going to trace the technical evolution of smart cards because I think it tells you where we've landed today and what our technical expectations should be of wallet technologies. So the first credit card was the Diners card in about 1955 in New York City, when a bunch of restaurateurs sort of thought, wow, wouldn't it be nice? And the proposition was, you don't need to extend credit to every single customer of yours who you'd like to extend credit to. I mean, credit's good for business. Restaurateurs wanted to extend credit, but how the hell do you reach comfort with a total stranger to do that? The Diners Club proposition was, you don't have to extend credit, we'll do it on your behalf. And the take-up was incredible. It was magic. Extending credit to people who you don't know. And then it was just a very straight procession of technical improvements to that idea of identifying a customer within a scheme. So we had the first magnetic stripe card. That's an IBM prototype from about 1970. Technically no different from the plastic cards that we have had ever since then. We turned to chip. A lot of us turned to chip. America. A lot of us in the rest of the world went to chip in about 1990. The chip card replacing the magnetic stripe card as the presentation medium for getting the primary account number of the customer from the data carrier to the merchant and then into the network where it really belongs. So chip cards, chip phones, the same idea, secure element, tamper-proof, cryptographically very powerful and sophisticated, lots of multiple certificates and key pairs, and secure storage in the enclave in the phone. And now we're seeing embedded cryptography in the microcontrollers. That's a Microsoft Azure Sphere microcontroller, usually thought of as an IoT sort of brains. And we saw a lot about that sort of stuff earlier today from that fabulous presentation by Ken Munro. And his call for private keys to be the guts of authentication for IoT, and that's the sort of thing that we're seeing now. So instead of having essentially zero cost but zero security device authentication through MAC addresses and God knows what, pay a few more pennies and everybody will have private keys. Everybody will have dozens of private keys for all of the things that they're controlling. I don't know whether we're still going to call it a wallet or not, but there will be wallets in these things that are every bit as important as the wallets that you are actually physically aware of for your payments and what have you. I can't help but throw in a level 1 data carrier that is still near and dear to most of us in the US, which is the Social Security card, and it's still using the same technology as 1955. So it's a data carrier, but not a particularly good one. Australia, by the way, shares many things with the US, and one of them is our allergy to national ID. But we also don't have a very sophisticated public debate about these things. So the idea of putting a chip into that Social Security card or our Medicare card still inspires and provokes a great deal of fear amongst the public. But there's some things happening that we think will turn that corner. It's funny, isn't it, that once you start putting socials and Medicare and health insurance into an iPhone, people don't worry about that so much anymore. Okay, what we've been talking about are facts and figures, primary account numbers, and the proof that goes with that data. So in the real world, we've had facts and evidence, like that's the stuff of courtroom dramas, isn't it? Facts and evidence. We know that there are facts, and the facts can be contested, and what you need is evidence. So in identity, we talk about claims and proofs, same thing. I'm going to claim to be over 21 years old. Where's the proof? Zero knowledge proof. There's all sorts of ways of doing it, but I just want to boil it down to facts and evidence, claims and proofs, data and metadata. Because what really matters about that technological progression we went through is that the facts remain the same. The primary account number is the same. In fact, I've got a primary account number on my Apple device that I know is exactly the same as the one that was on my plastic card about 28 years ago. So what's happened is that the data's remained the same, but the technology has allowed us to tell a better story about the data as it moves from the customer to the relying party, in this case the merchant. So same data, better and better and better metadata as we go along. So you think about the story that gets told about the data. And because a PAN is presented from a smartphone, the merchant picks up all of this extra metadata without even knowing it. But I also want to shout out to FIDO, because the FIDO metadata standard and the FIDO metadata dictionary and that sort of resource that's available allows merchant software to know a huge amount about the state of the customer at the time that you paid out from your card. So, for example, in Australia, they've lifted the PIN limits. I think it changes from banking system to banking system, but there's almost no PIN limit on my phone now. If I've unlocked this phone with Face ID, the merchant terminal no longer enforces a PIN. So I did a brake job on my car recently, thousands of dollars. Face, tap, boom, almost too easy. But the story behind the data is that the metadata tells the system that the PAN, pardon me, is genuine because it was signed by my bank, and that signature carries through. The PAN was also signed by me or my phone at the time that I tapped it, and the FIDO protocols allow the merchant to know that that phone was unlocked seconds ago by a face. So that whole story substantiates the data. It's the story behind the data. Wallet technology is being reborn if you like, reborn, if you like. We've had things like X509 digital credentials for a long time, and we've had SIM cards. Like I said, most of the world has had chip cards for banking for decades. Those are verifiable credentials. Those are statements of facts that are signed by issuers like banks and telcos and MNOs, carried in a secure element, and then presented cryptographically. So when you present your chip card or your Apple Pay, or when you present your phone number through a SIM, the presentation is also digitally signed by the chip. So the presentation is signed, and now we've got new standards and new formats and new protocols for developing and delivering the same idea, signed assertions. So I want to generalise and say that we've got a really good pattern. It's called the verifiable credential. There is data about a subject. Subject might be me. There's metadata about the subject, which is really where the action is. There's the key pair of the subject, which allows me to present, and there's again that origin signature that gives you provenance of the credential all the way back. Now, what else can we do with these things? Verifiable credentials of human subjects is the talk of the town. Verifiable credentials of any subject, non-human subjects, motor cars, exactly what Ken was talking about today. If you've got some important fact about a car, like its warranty status or its manufacturer or whatever it is, those facts could be embedded in the car's secure element in the form of a verifiable credential of a non-human subject. So the wallet's just the holder for this sort of thing. There's a lot of fine print there. The wallet should be tamper resistant. It should have a key pair generator. Key pair should be generated locally and never exposed, blah, blah, blah. You guys know all of this. It's like Crypto 101. And I want that T-shirt that says, I'm old enough that crypto means cryptocurrency. So Crypto 101, how do you protect these things? A wallet is going to have a presentation, like a UX, that allows people to see what these things are in a human-readable way, and there's going to be a bunch of them. So I can hold my driver's license, but maybe I don't need to show my driver's license anymore to prove my age. It's much better to just prove my age. So it's probably going to come from the same place. The proof of age is going to be signed by the DMV, just like a driver's license, but it's going to be a much more precise credential. My COVID status, etc., and the signature of the origin at all times. Crypto processor so that you can then sign things when you present them. An API for loading, an API for presenting. Great. And that's the subject of what people are talking about in standardising. It's basically how an Apple and Google wallet works. It's kind of what the Open Wallet Foundation is going to work, going to standardise. But there's more to the story than that. Acceptance is the trick. The magic of acceptance in the credit card scheme, and it should be a wonder of the modern technology world, the credit card. I can use my Australian credit card at any store on the strip, and of course the merchant doesn't know me. That's not the point. The point is the merchant doesn't know the Australian bank. The merchant has no relationship with my bank, and yet my bank is extending credit to a merchant. There's no relationship between these people. How could there be? So the magic is that the credit is extended through a fourth party, that's the merchant's bank. The relying party has a bank that plugs it into this network. So I'm brought together to a merchant. We're brought together by intermediary banks. And that's what acceptance is all about. So this client software that pulls out the wallet, I'm skipping this really quickly. The issuer APIs get the credentials into the wallet. Here's the interesting part. When it comes to present my verifiable credential, proving how old I am, for example, or proving that my COVID status is clear, the relying party needs to be prepared to accept that credential. They need to even be ready to expect the credential, let alone accept it. It can't come as a surprise to a liquor store that somebody's presenting a proof of age. They need to already be programmed to accept proof of age. So all of this heavy lifting needs to be done before my verifiable credential wallet can interface to anything. Verifiable credentials don't verify themselves. The magic is outside the wallet. The magic is in these schemes. So think about it. Nobody's ever going to force a relying party to accept a credential. the liquor store is not going to accept any old proof of age. The liquor store somehow, they're not going to do this individually, but the liquor store is probably part of a chain, and the chain has got legal counsel, and the legal counsel has gone and checked the laws. So a lot of work goes behind the scenes to get the software at the liquor store, the transaction system, ready to accept the verifiable credential. So there's metadata again. It's not even the metadata about the subject, it's the metadata about the credential itself. The liquor store is going to want to know that there are particular approved proof of age credentials that they can accept. And again, I'm personifying all of this. I think it's really worth remembering that the liquor store is not doing anything. The liquor store owner or the clerk is running up some software that's been provided to them, and the software is doing all of the work, but the software is not smart. The software is running a set of rules and scripts that have been programmed months ago, and some metadata and some magic numbers to allow it to then accept these credentials. I'm really labouring the point, but we have to remember that verifiable credentials don't verify themselves. There's a network which has joined these parties together legally, contractually. Everybody's signing the same contract. Every relying party has got the same experience of one of these networks. Every relying party in the world that accepts American Express has signed a contract, and the contract is almost exactly the same everywhere in the world. It's like legal magic. And it's important because you can't have a nest of many-to-many relationships. You can't have every relying party needing to have a relationship or even knowledge of every source of credentials in the world. Imagine the mess. So instead we've got nice clean acceptance networks in the credit card land, and we're anticipating, we're predicting, and Lockstep has been working on an architecture that would, inspired by that credit card idea, have a globally scalable acceptance network for verifiable credentials outside of the wallet. Credential gets into the wallet, cool. For the credential to be accepted, and the one technical thing I want to say in this presentation is that installing the root keys for every one of those acceptable credentials, that's the real barrier to take up. I used to actually have a Diners Club card, and it was pretty cool. The rewards were really great. I wanted to use it wherever I could, but it's not for me, the Diners Club holder, to tell the merchant, here, I've got a cool credit card. Credentials are only accepted at places that have already decided to accept them. So Kim Cameron at IIW, a few years ago, I wasn't there. I've got the quote from a journalist who was there. I'm sure some people were here. I'm sure some people here were there. But Kim said that there is this problem, there's an asymmetry, that it is the relying party that is sort of setting the rules. And if the relying party doesn't like it, then a scheme, an identity scheme, goes nowhere. Now, like I say, I wasn't there. I don't know what the moral of that story was. I don't know what point Kim was trying to make. The point I would make is, so be it. It can't be any other way. It can't be any other way than to have the relying party make that decision about whether or not this credential makes sense or not. Because it's the relying party that owns the risk. And if somebody is not over 18 or over 21, depending on what jurisdiction you're in, and if the liquor store accepts a proof of age that's wrong, the liquor store might be in a whole lot of trouble. So they call the shots. And it's an uncomfortable truth that in the face of self-sovereign identity and user-centric identity and all of these good things that would put the user at the centre of the universe, the uncomfortable truth is that the relying party is the centre of the universe. And that's why we at Lockstep are calling them the risk owner. Now, that is not to say that the user doesn't matter. Of course the user matters. And we will have really rich user experiences. The user will feel as though they're in the middle of the shots, calling the shots in the middle of the action. By all means, because good software and good user experiences make the user feel good. But underneath the covers, there are two brutal truths. One of them is that the relying party accepts the risk, They're going to call the shots, or their proxies and their representatives and their associations are going to call the shots. The second uncomfortable truth is that it doesn't matter what wallet you've got. The best wallet in the world is no good if the relying party hasn't already made arrangements to accept what's in the wallet. And we know this every day. You know, this is not a surprise. The Visa accepted here, decal, it's sort of part of modern life, isn't it? It's a symbol, it's semiotics of retail therapy, but we've forgotten what it means. The merchant only gets to hang those things on the front after they've signed the merchant acceptance agreement with Visa and MasterCard. So that brand, there's so much more to that brand than meets the eye. And what it's done is that it's set up the merchant to accept those credentials. And that's what we think is the missing piece in the wallet debate. We need to have the acceptance network so that verifiable credentials can make sense, so that they are legible at scale. Thank you. Now, I knew I wasn't going to keep an eye on the time. I don't even know where she's gone. She's probably been waving a 10-minute flag. I guess we've got a few minutes.
Can you talk about
Recovery. Absolutely. It's almost like a gimme question for some of the FIDO things. We have made recovery a problem because we've put a lot into the wallet. So that CMM model that we produce, the further up the chain you get, the less forgiving that technology becomes. So once you get really, quote unquote, really good security with private keys in enclaves, recovery becomes a problem. So we've made that problem, and that problem, I think, is a cost of it's the price we pay for good security. That problem is being solved all over the place. So the FIDO Alliance is solving it in different ways. Part of the solution was to, in fact, step back some of that security standard to allow syndication and synchronization of private keys. Makes recovery a lot easier. But recovery it's a big problem, and it's a problem that needs to be solved anyway. And I'm not here to shill for Apple. I just think that Apple is the light on the hill that shows one of the best ways of doing this stuff at the moment. But clearly the Apple recovery, I mean, this phone is actually new, and I should know how this works, but recovering or porting an old Apple account to a new one that's another act of magic. So yeah, it's a solvable problem. Thank you very much. We'll be around, lots of time for questions.